What's going on? It's Ed here from Geek, and I am back with the band. The reunited, or the reunion tour is back. We got Nick, we got Dustin, we got Mark. Everyone's back from vacation, and life is good. So what's up, fellas?
What is this?
Ready to rock, ready for the fall.
Wow,
Yeah, ready for the fall sales season to start picking up.
I can just feel the enthusiasm on the call right now. So we're back with another Google Ads Agency Roundtable. Prior to this, we were catching up before we went live, and we were talking about the concept of Google Ads audits. Let's go through and just talk why you'd want your Google Ads account audited, and then kind of what pieces you want to go through and audit. And let's go through kind of a checklist of what you guys see. So instead of kind of calling on people, let's just spit out ideas and kind of just spitball off each other. So like I'll start when we audit someone's account. First thing I'm looking at is are they running a smart campaign or an actual Google Ads search campaign? And are they running on the display network as well? So that's typically the first things we're looking at. What are you guys doing next?
For me, I'm looking at tracking. It's the biggest area that I think out of hundreds or maybe thousands of accounts that I've done an audit for. I would say that the amount of times, even for large accounts, the amount of times that tracking is actually working as intended is probably 5% of the time. I mean, literally 5%. So I think tracking is one of the biggest ones, because if the tracking ain't right, besides looking at bad traffic, there's really nothing you can do to audit, like CPA type, like anything related to a conversion, right? At that point, you
all the data is shit at that point.
Yeah, well, all the data on conversion, but I mean, you could see traffic, right? We have bad search terms coming in, so it takes our audit from being like a traffic and conversion sort of an audit, not to steal their name, but it's kind of what it is, to just a traffic audit, right? So now you're like, well, I know this is really bad. This I don't know is, which one of these ad groups would be better because of the CPA. We don't know, right? So it's just kind of like a mini audit at that point, a traffic audit.
So let me ask you this: what are you seeing as errors in terms of what people are doing for conversion tracking? Are they putting codes on the wrong places, not using them, using the wrong types? Like, walk through what you're commonly seeing in terms of errors at the tracking level.
Yeah, so there's all of that. So there's usually, like, if it's a local business or a call driven business, they're not tracking calls from website, not even doing it effectively. I've even seen this with agencies, because we've done a lot of audits for agencies that need a little help. And even in their stuff, they're not, like, their clients are not set up that way. That's one big one. Also having conversion tracking tags on pages of the website that are not like a thank you page, right? So nobody's filling out a form. It's just like, I saw one yesterday, and there's a conversion when somebody hits the about page.
Yep.
Okay, well, unless you think people seeing that page is a valuable action, you probably do not want to consider that a conversion. So those are two of some of the most popular. Then if it's e-commerce, then sometimes they're just not tracking the revenue, right? They're tracking a sale, not the revenue, or they're not tracking dynamic revenue. If it's like a product, like if you're using Shopify or something like that, it's super simple to get that. But if you're using anything that might require a little bit more manual effort, then sometimes you don't want to use the default, like every conversion is this amount, unless it's always going to be that amount, right? If they buy two, what about that scenario? So things like that. It's just usually a missing tracking, over tracking the wrong things, or not tracking your revenue appropriately. That's usually the main ones.
Cool. Nick, Mark, what do you guys got next? What are you typically looking for?
So I'll preface all this with, if you get a phone call, if you're a business owner or a company owner, and you get a phone call from somebody that says they want to do a free audit for you, run or delete it or unsubscribe to the spam, because honestly, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to do an audit. They're going to tell you that the account sucks and it's really bad. In my industry, they're technically trying to find my intellectual property. So they're trying to get that client of ours to open up the books, open up the ads account and be like, well, this is how Nick's team does it. And they're going to be like, oh, that's not good. And I wouldn't do this and I wouldn't do that, because they don't know any better. So when people are knocking at your door, asking to do an audit, and I can guarantee you all 4 of us here have never reached out to somebody and offered to do an audit. It's always, hey, can you please do an audit for me? Can you look at this account? And we do it begrudgingly. We're like, okay, yeah, we'll do it. The reason we don't like doing it is because it makes our skin crawl. And I think we were talking about that earlier. Like, it sucks to go and look at somebody blasting through cash for no apparent reason. So yeah, if somebody calls you and says they want to audit your account, tell them no, thank you. If you don't feel confident in it, talk with your account manager that you're working with and say, should we do an audit? Should we have a third party come in and take a look at it? we'd be open to that conversation instead of somebody just coming in and saying they want to do it. When we do audits, like Dustin said, conversions are important. I go directly to search terms. And a lot of times I would venture to guess 85% of the PPC managers in the world have never been to search terms. Because if they would have noticed they're spending money on trash. Like there's just no reason for it, right? So I immediately go
elaborate on what does that mean? Explain that's driven by match types and like kind of walk someone through why that's important.
So if you're doing exact match, gone are the days if you did an exact match and you wanted to do Charlotte homes for sale, and that's the only keyword term that you wanted to bid on. Now it's going to give you Charlotte NC homes for sale in Charlotte area. It's going to give you variations of that exact. If you go broad, it could be Charlotte garage sale. It could be Charlotte dogs for sale in Charlotte, North Carolina. It could go all over the board. Google's AI sucks, and I'll be the first to tell anybody that. So when you give Google the keys to your car and say, drive it as fast or as hard as you want, I'll just keep pumping gas into it, and hopefully we'll make it past the finish line. You're not going to do it efficiently. So what I mean by that is if you're in search terms and you see these terms like dogs and cats when we're trying to do a real estate term, that's an issue. But Google's going to do that to you because you're too dumb to know any better, right? So Google tax, again, is what we call it. But we're essentially, you're running into that circle of life where you're continuing to spend money on stuff you don't want. But if we go into that search terms report, which is easy to get to on any ads account, everybody here knows how to get there instantly. I'll look at that before I reverse back and look at anything else and say, well, you spent 50% of your budget on stuff that has no relevancy to your business. Is that cool? Are we good with that? And if you're not, get rid of these instantly, right? It just shows that the account hasn't been managed properly. And that's why I don't like doing audits, is because when I go there, again, 80% of the time I go there, I see stuff I don't want to see. And I'll audit my account manager's accounts, and I'll look at it and I'll hammer them on it. Be like, hey, why is this keyword showing up? Or this keyword is consistently not doing well. Why aren't we pausing that? Why don't we give life to something else? So it's not just our accounts aren't perfect. It's a living, breathing organism. Google Ads accounts are. It's not set it and forget it. So I audit my own accounts all the time for my employees. I hate auditing anything outside of the organization because it's just, again, it makes my skin crawl to look at people spending money for no reason. Yeah. And then the worst part is you get blowback from that person you're doing that favor for, right? Because we don't charge for audits. I know you guys stopped doing audits for free, and there's a charge for it to a point. I just don't like doing it because I usually get blowback. Be like, well, they really mean well, and I think that I got to give them more time to figure things out. No, you don't. The account was set up wrong in the beginning. Like
either you don't know enough not to put broad match in there, or you didn't know enough not to accept Google's recommendations. So
right.
Which one are we going with? Now, having said that, there are some niches where broad match actually plays well, but they're few and far between. Right. Like I can count on one hand how many times we'll actually use broad match.
We use broad match, but we're heavy-handed with the negative keyword terms, right? Mm-hmm. So we will use broad match. It'll pull in more traffic. It'll give us more ideas for what's going on in the industry. But it's broad match with a heavy hand on that delete button, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's broad match isn't the devil. It's just, if you're going to do broad match, you better manage that account tight.
Yep. Mark, what do you got? What are you typically looking at next?
Well, I made some notes from what Nick was saying. So if you're a real estate investor, terms like cats and dogs are not good. Okay. And I like the fact that as long as your Google Ads person means well, it's okay if things aren't tracking. I was going to bring up how we audit our own accounts sometimes, because every account is auditable, but it's literally the difference. Like if I audited Nick's accounts or he audited mine, we would be expert on expert making improvements. What lots of times it's like, when we go into audit an account, it's like, I just built my house with Legos. How's it look to you, Mr. Architect? It looks like a toy. It looks terrible. You guys, this is front to back the worst thing I've ever seen. And then that happens over and over again. I don't have to audit accounts necessarily. I need 3 minutes. Like I think Ed, you said you just asked for a couple of stats. I need like 3 minutes to look at account, but the audit gives you credibility. So, we provide a written audit, and then we look at, as Dustin mentioned, the first thing is conversion tracking. Like I jump in there to a campaign and look, and if they've got 103% conversion rate, that's usually a sign that something's not right.
Yep.
Or even if they have a decent conversion rate, then I go in to look at segments and see what they're tracking as a conversion action. And then that's where you'll see like web page visit. Okay, well, that's again not a real thing, because a conversion in our mind, there's exceptions to this. If you're doing top of the funnel or middle of the funnel, or you're trying to get people into a course, or you're selling a long-term sales product and you want to get a white paper, but typically it's a phone call or a form fill or a purchase. Those are the only things that really matter. Whether someone visited your about page or not is typically not going to lead to something of significance. And that's a problem if you're using any automation that's optimizing based on conversions, because you're taking a mistake and then compounding that mistake. The other things that we look at typically are just going to some of the basic settings like locations. Who are you targeting and how are you targeting them? What bid methodology are you using? And if you're using manual, well, the other thing too is we still every once in a while see someone who's running display, the search and display. You can run display, but
we just had a client today turn it on because Google recommended it, and we hadn't been in there fast enough to turn off the recommendation. So display ran and burned through a bunch of budget, and I had to email them saying, please don't turn that on. It's not.
Please don't ever do that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing is we'll go in and we'll look at is auto apply suggestions turned on and let them know that's a bad thing. And then Nick, you pointed out the huge issue is search terms. Are they running a bunch of broad match? I mean, broad match does serve a purpose sometimes, and there's specific industries or reasons to use it, but it's kind of like doing a controlled burn. There's a reason to use fire sometimes to clear a field, but you don't just use fire left and right, because that's what broad match is. It's going to burn through your, just burn right through your budget, whatever.
I like
it is.
that. I like that analogy, man. That's your
I'm trying
best
to come
analogy
up
that I've heard from you. I like that. Control burn.
I'm going to work on that until next week. New analogies for you.
I like it.
So yeah, we look at all those settings and things like that. But like I said, you can jump into an account and you look at, are they running a smart campaign? Okay, I can't really audit. Are they running search? And if they are they running a bunch of broad match? If you go in and it's campaign 1, ad group 1, you don't have to do anymore. So there's a difference between auditing like a real campaign, and mostly what we're trying to do is nicely point out how totally wrong every single thing is in your campaign. Which I have a question for you guys. How many campaigns that are running out there, let's say search, do you think are like close to right? Like
5%.
I think you pre-call before we start recording, you threw out the number 98% are so 2% are in, are right. I'd say that's a pretty fair estimation. Most campaigns that we audit, like we've been auditing campaigns since 2015 and seeing big company names in there, and you're just like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And you see ones that Google reps have built, and you're like, what the heck? So, I'd say it's maybe not 2%, maybe it's 5%. I don't know, but I'd say it's probably on the very low side, low side of less than 10%.
Yeah, I think 10% is probably a good number. I would say that as well.
So 90% are probably not set up right, and Google's making how much a year?
Mm-hmm.
Billions.
Well, I mean, if you look at their auto suggestions, it's masterful copywriting and masterful, not mental manipulation, but like, what's the word for it? Conversion rate optimization. It's incredible because they're the authority figure. Why wouldn't this be correct for my campaign?
Yeah.
And so
why would they lead us astray?
Yeah, it's
Do no evil, right?
Used to be do no evil. I don't think it's the same.
I think they dropped
their
that
motto anymore, is it?
Yeah.
Maybe it is. I don't know.
And that's it. Sorry, Google. We're done.
Yeah.
We're done.
I mean, yeah.
But yeah. So well, I'll throw out one other thing. when we look, like Nick said, just we know right away if you look at the match types and you see a broad in there, and you see multiple broads in there, and you see a lot of impressions, and you'll see a lot of impressions, but if you see a lot of clicks in there, you know right off the bat without even getting to the search term report, you know there's going to be an issue there in most niches. Dustin,
you know, there's a thing that the common man can do in their account to check to see if their account manager is doing their job. And it's very simple. You go into change history. And I will tell you, if an account is running really well, we might not touch it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. If it's running like gangbusters and everything's going great, why touch that, right? But if you look at that change history and you look and see what are they doing for changes, how often are they touching it, it might be you don't want to touch it too often, but look in there, and if you look at what it says, it'll tell you somebody clicked on the Google recommendations. So if you've got an account manager that's just going in and saying yes to all the account recommendations, buddy, you don't need an account manager. You can do that yourself. You can burn your own cash. I mean, so looking at change histories will give you a good idea of what's going on in that account. And if our clients ask, we'll show them what the change histories look like. If there's and you can have, you know, paralysis by analysis where you have an account manager doing too much, pulling too many levers. But I think that's a good baseline for people that have access to their accounts. If they want to see, you know, what's going on inside their account, look at the change history. Now, don't beat somebody up because they didn't do something for a couple of weeks if the numbers are good. But at the same time, ask questions on why are we doing Google recommendations? Why did you feel like this was a good idea, right? Because it tells the story of that account.
I think I did a video one time on what you mentioned there, which was over optimizing, because some people feel like they have to be doing something all the time, and then you optimize this cost down, and then you optimize that cost down. Next thing you know, you optimize yourself out of leads, you know. So there's a balance there between optimizing and just doing busy work. Especially if you're using a third-party piece of software, they're generally designed to continue to try to come up with a recommendation.
Yep.
And some of those recommendations, there's a balance between, you know, do I want to pay a little extra for leads, but get to leads? Or do I want to optimize my cost down to, you know, $13 a lead, but only get 7 of them?
Right. Yeah. There's a balance.
Like I can get a 75% conversion rate on a campaign if I want to focus in on one exact match keyword and only get 3 leads a month. And because people are always asking, what's a good, you know, conversion rate? And I'm like, well, we shoot between 10 and 35. We have some lower, some higher, but it depends on what you're trying to do. I'm sorry, I just segued to an entirely different conversation.
No,
Ed,
it's
you're in
relevant,
charge
though.
here.
It's relevant. It all plays in. Dustin, I'm going to circle back. I see you wanted to say something. I just want to say something to what Mark just said. Having the goal in mind is also really important. And when you're doing the audit, because with target CPA now, conversion rate isn't necessarily the main factor, and CTR, click-through rate, aren't the main factors anymore. It's your cost per lead. So like we have some in the real estate investor space where we're hitting their cost per lead that they want, but their conversion rate might be at 10%, which historically would have been super low for us. We'd want to be at 20% if we were running max conversions or manual. But when you're running these new AI bid strategies, you have to pick what is your main KPI that you're looking for. So when you're doing that audit, make sure you know what they think success looks like first, so that you can work backwards into a solution.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say. I was going to say, you can do an audit to tell how things, like certain things are out of place. But when we try to do an audit for somebody, I usually get on the horn with them and try to figure out what are you trying to do? Like, tell me what your outcome, an ideal outcome would be. What products or services are we going to focus on? Because what happens is if you go into an account assuming that what they want has been represented there, you'd be vastly mistaken. So it might be that you tell me that we want to focus on this particular product or service, but when I look at what you built, it's not even there, or it's there in a small ad group, but this other thing is stealing all your traffic, right? So if I go into it just looking at what is, it doesn't mean that that's what should be. And so I think that's a big part of it, is knowing where we're trying to get to. Also, any targets. I can't even believe this, but I'd say maybe 20% of the time that I do an audit and I ask them, okay, what is your target CPA? What's your target ROAS? Maybe 20% of the time they have a number for me.
Right.
They don't know. They tell me, oh, well, what do you think? I'm like, well, I don't know. It's your business. Like, I can tell you what what I would, guesstimate it to be. Like if you're in a service industry, I mean, your cost per lead could vary. It could be $30, it could be 300, depending on what kind of services you have. But it really comes down to your margins, comes down to a lot of different things. Your average cost per, either product or service, whatever. Are they repeat customers? Are we getting a lifetime customer here, or somebody's going to buy again, or just a one-off deal? So there's a lot of questions that I think people need to ask. But if you've never communicated that to either the person on your team that's running your ads, or an agency, or it's yourself, ask yourself, how can a person hit a goal that they don't know of, right? And if they're getting a good result and you're happy with it without knowing all that, then that's great. But use that as a baseline. And then now let's figure out, where are we right now? Okay, is this a good number? Are we happy with that? And that way you have something to shoot for going forward. Because the worst thing for like me and our team is that we have a client that we bring on and say, okay, and my team asks me, okay, what's the target for this? Oh, the client wasn't sure. We're just gonna run the ads, get the best we can, and ask him at the end of the month how he feels about it. Like that's what it's gonna come down to. And for the first few months, sometimes you got to do that. But then after you've got some baseline data, that becomes our internal baseline. The client hasn't set that, but if they're happy and these are the numbers, then those seem like happy numbers. So we're gonna work off that. But I think it's really important, if you're gonna have somebody do an audit or you're auditing your own stuff, you have to know what success looks like, or else how are you going to get there? And then there's also, like you said, Ed, there's bid strategies that are more relevant for one thing than another. There are certain campaign types that might do better for one thing than another. It just depends what your goal is. So, a lot of times people are just like, oh, well, they think this is easier than it is. And it can be. I mean, you can keep it super simple. If you got a small budget and you can compete in a big pond with your small budget and take your chips and walk home and you're happy with it, then you can do that. But if you want to, usually this happens when you want to grow and you want to like take over market share, you need to be thinking about this stuff. It's not just like there's $50,000 a month worth of traffic. I'm going to buy 1,000 of it and I'm happy with that. Okay, good. But if you want to get hired up, taking over that market, you're going to have to think about that a little bit. So it's not just a one-off approach, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
That's a question that we bring up. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Question that or a statement I try to make when we do an audit is we're going to audit what exists. We're not auditing, and you use the exact right term. We're not auditing what should be. We're auditing what is. So I don't know what should be because we didn't have those conversations in the beginning. We didn't intake you and, we're just auditing what exists. And we're going to tell you based on what exists, what we would do differently. But again, if people ask me all the time, another question, which is what should my budget be? Well, that depends. It seems like we should be able to just put together a little type form for them that automatically answers all these questions for everybody. What should my budget be? $1,500.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It depends entirely on your market, your goals. Do you want to own the market? Do you want to get a lot of leads? Do you have a bunch of people sitting around without work? There's more to it than just, it's a business. Yeah.
The funny part about the budget question, this drives me freaking nuts, is that every time somebody asks me that question, they already have a number that they're going to spend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so annoying. So you do keyword research. It's, oh, look, we go after these keywords and we have these keywords. We have there's like $30,000 a month worth of traffic. How much of that do you want? Oh, I'm only going to spend $3,000. Okay, so what the hell did I waste all this time for? Why don't you just say I have $3,000? Give me as much of the market with that $3,000 as I can capture.
That's
there's
what I
almost
teach
no
my sales guy
strategic
all
benefit
the
to
time.
having okay, let's spend $2,000 instead of $3,000. What's the strategy there? You get less leads. Okay, well, there you go then. What the hell is the point of all this research? I'm sorry I'm saying it like that, but it drives me crazy. There's no strategy. I mean, again, more leads, less leads, more market, less market. But like if there's $50,000 available, are you going to spend it all? No. Okay, so what the heck does it matter? Just give me what you got. Let's make it happen. Let's make it work. And then we'll worry about growing it. When you want to grow, it's like, okay, how much more can we grow? Let's have that conversation. The best way to figure that out, run a campaign with your existing budget, look at the impression share, and figure out the difference. And now I can tell you with pretty good accuracy how much more you can spend and what the market share is. But doing it beforehand, Google's tools are not that great. The estimates are almost always wrong.
And they'll throw in broad match.
CPCs are wrong. The CPCs are low, and the traffic is estimated to be high. And it's always the opposite of that.
Right.
Dustin, I'm going to cut you off real quick. Nick, you got to go in 30 seconds. What's a final note for you before you hop off?
Gosh.
Your leads suck.
The leads don't suck. You suck. No, from what Dustin says, Dustin, so when we have a client ask us what our budget, what should my budget be? I throw it back on them. How many leads do you want? If they give me a number of leads, I'm going to reverse engineer that. I'm going to tell them that. And then in 30, 60, 90 days, we'll revisit that. And I'll tell you how much how many leads are actually available at that, at that budget that we've decided on. But no, you guys are right. Again, auditing it's cringeworthy. Sometimes we have to do it, but at the same time, again, whoever's watching this, if you have access to your accounts, check a couple of easy things. Do not start meddling in an account if you're paying somebody to do it. You have to have communication with that person. If you don't get communication with your account managers, fire them. If you cannot get them on the phone, fire them. If they're not giving you reports, fire them. Like, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for that professionalism. And if they can't be professional, then don't use them, and pay a couple extra bucks to get a true professional like one of the four guys here. That's very simple. Got it. Nice. I'm gonna throw out something. Nick, I know you got to go, so if you drop off, we'll talk to you later.
Later, dude.
Dustin, you brought up asking clients what their goals are and about their business. I like an example of this happens a good bit. We get clients that'll come in for remediation, so mold removal, water damage. Some will come in where they just do mold testing, and mold testing is like a $500 service. Maybe it's a little bit more, maybe it's up to $1,000, depends on what they're testing, but generally lower ticket. Those guys are competing on the same keywords that the mold removal and water damage companies are paying $20, $30, $40, $50 a click for. So it becomes really prohibitive for them to get a cheap enough lead cost, at least in our experience, a cheap enough lead cost for them to make an ROI on their service, because testing and remediation are two typically different services. Usually you can't test and remediate. Some states might be different, but I know in this particular person I'm talking about, they couldn't. So it just, you need to know that ahead of time, instead of just going with the assumption that it's mold removal and, the cost per lead could be a little bit higher because the job size is higher. Like, that's just a simple business conversation you're having in the sales process to understand what they're doing, to understand their gross profit margins, to understand what they can do to how much they can acquire business at, the cost of customer acquisition. I just wanted to throw that out there as an example to what you were talking about, Dustin, because I think it's super important to have that context and understand that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think if you know your target, like I don't even want to mention this person, it's totally crazy, but like if hey, look, I can only pay because you've done this before or whatever. Like sometimes you don't know how much you can pay per lead because search leads are typically better quality than some other, not as good as referrals, but certainly better than maybe Facebook lead ads, right? Just on average, it's typically a lot better. I'm not saying Facebook lead ads are garbage. Some of them can be, but anyway. But if that, look, my average job is $3,000 and I need to make $1,000 in profit, then okay, well, I know I can reverse engineer that back to what I either know or expect a conversion rate to be. And now I know how much traffic, how much I can pay per click. And if that number for that pay per click, that number is much lower than what you're going to see in the industry, then you're going to have to tell them, look, like this may not be a good fit, or it might be something where you get some leads, but you're not really able to compete at the level, pay enough for a good volume of leads, right? These are the conversations that you can have. And this is more, this is kind of like an audit, but I do this on the sales side if I can, because I want to set the right expectations of, is this going to work for you? I had one guy that wanted to do an audit, and I asked him what his target ROAS is, and he said he needed 100 to 1 ROAS. I'm like, dude,
So do I.
His brand probably isn't even getting 100 to 1 ROAS. You want that on cold traffic. Yep. And I think the average ticket was like $200. So you want a $2 conversion out of Google Ads.
I love that. That's a great question. What type of conversion cost are you looking for? Because that can pre-warn you of insanity.
Yeah. And sometimes they just don't know. Great. Okay, fine. Like, hey, sometimes they're coming to me asking the question, hey, could this work? And that's how I will be able to tell. But if you come at me with, could this work? And you've got no numbers for me. Well, I'm going to look at my crystal ball and or my magic 8-ball, and whatever it says when I roll it over is what I'm going to tell you, because I don't know. It's going to be a gut feel. Like if you're a plumber, hey, I'm a plumber. You think I can get leads? Yeah, I'm sure we can get you leads. What's the cost going to be? Probably 100, maybe under 100 to $200, depending on what you're doing, what market you're in. We can pretty much tell that, but like when it comes to like some random thing, or you're like, for example, Ed, you sent a lead our way for a tour guy that we started working with. He's got no search volume for what he offers. So originally I told him this, you know, if there's no search here, I'm going to have to start going with like ancillary secondary keywords that are something different, but we're going to try to flip them. That does not always play out well, right? Because you just don't know. Will you convert those people?
Yeah.
And maybe you'll convert them this month, but next month, the people that clicked on that ad or saw the ad weren't that interested in your thing. So it's like a volatile thing. But these are the kind of things you know going in after you've done things enough time, you can set those expectations where, at least if nothing else, like it's not a total blind side and you've sold this client something you can't perform. They kind of know the risk, they kind of know the game plan, and you can hopefully account for that. But without any information, we're not geniuses here. We're not mind readers, you know.
I think a lot of it comes down to being a business owner and having business acumen and understanding business and gross profit, and understanding that business is not top line revenue. It's not what you get, it's what you keep. So like understanding that these people are spending money to acquire business, and you need to have a rough idea of that number. When you've done it enough, you'll have a general sense within niches that you work in a lot. But if it's a niche you're not in, you kind of have to walk through that process to get a grasp of the numbers. And you know, as to the people watching this, if you're an agency owner or freelancer, kind of up your business skills and understand gross profit, and understand how customer acquisition works, so that you become a better freelancer, consultant, owner, and you can help your customers better and do some of that consultative sales approach, because Google Ads is not right for everybody, and you have to have enough context to understand when it's right for someone and when it's not. Like comes up frequently with real estate investors that we deal with, and they're what it's called an assignment fee. So when they're flipping their contracts, not actually flipping the house, but just selling off their contracts or signing their contracts, it's called an assignment fee. Their assignment fee is $5,000, $7,000. I know Google Ads probably not right for them because that's a little bit too small. It might be if they're doing a very big volume, but if it's one market and it's a $3K a month budget, I'm not real bullish on being able to get enough leads to get enough deal flow to get them an ROI with that kind of an assignment fee. So having that context is super important as you're growing, because it's going to help your customers do better. And knowing when to say no is just as important as when to say yeses.
Amen.